I'm going to go ahead and call this Rules Committee meeting to order. Let's do introductions, starting on this side.
Pete Peterson.
Thanks, Alito. Austin Davidson.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera.
Crystal Kennedy.
All right. So we just have 2 items on our agenda, and one of them actually is going to go a lot more quickly than I had intended. So let's start off with goals. So on goals, unfortunately, I lost my notes on 2 of the pillars that we worked on. So I've been spending a lot of my time recently recreating the notes from the recordings. So today I don't have final versions for us to review. I will be having the clerk email out drafts to everyone on Monday, and then if we could, Jennifer, put paper copies in everyone's boxes on Monday as well. I feel personally pretty meetinged out about this topic, so I don't intend to call another meeting of the Rules Committee to review the final drafts. I am going to rely on everyone independently reviewing the final drafts and sending in comments via email. If any changes are made from comments that I receive, I'll make sure to have the clerk send out a final version so no one's surprised of any changes made between the final and whatever it is put before us in December. Any questions on that? Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and walk through the communications pillar. I understand the communications working group met yesterday, and excited to see the results.
Okay. So yeah, we did meet yesterday, and I apologize. I did a quick summary of our goals. I didn't get to the larger paragraph explanations. But what it really comes down to is the overarching theme is we want to communicate more effectively with the public, and we want to make sure that our view is getting out at least equally to the administration. So the short-term goal is we kind of came up with 7 kind of items that could happen either by hiring a full-time public engagement officer or a consultant, and we're waiting to hear from Barbara, or maybe we'll learn in the next item about how much that would cost to do something where Barbara really suggested that the minutes clerk functions could potentially be combined with basically a public engagement officer, or if this position went into her office, their flexibility is that they could accommodate these things to create and maintain a scrolling agenda for assembly meetings. So, you know, if you have to go out or you're coming in from the entrance, you kind of tell where we are, passed, not passed, move, change the order of the day. We got some comments, I think you probably all saw, on the plastic bag issue. Someone was waiting with a kid, confused on where we were. Work on a newsletter format for members. The big question there is, could we ever get an 11-member newsletter out? Or would it be more like, here's a great format, use it in your district, use it individually, or something like that? I think that one's got a lot more discussion potentially. Social media outreach, so not only using Facebook, potentially the clerk's office has a Twitter. I'm not the one to talk about that. Has a Twitter. Tweets, whatever they do. But they could put certain notices out that way in terms of like, this thing's coming up, don't forget to check out this. Fact sheets as appropriate, although we don't want to certainly push all fact sheets onto the clerk's office. Some of those should come from departments. Potentially press releases. I don't know, I'm sure you all saw the great little press release that came out about the port, but maybe a monthly quick and dirty little press release out from us, like here it is. Facebook, of course, the clerk continued to do the Facebook items as well. So it's kind of those things, and then like other communications things that we would come up with over time, but that was kind of what came out of the session as we talked. This was number 2. I'm really.
Can I add something to number 1?
Go for it.
I just wanted to say that, you know, Chris and I and others, I think, have been talking a lot about the communication by the administration on homelessness and how we haven't been able to share a lot of the accomplishments we've made, and that, you know, part of this is good because people just understand what's going on, but part of it is like telling the story of what we're working on, and that's been sort of missing, because because we really rely on the mayor and his team to communicate. And so if we're not communicating, no one knows what the assembly does. And you door knock at people, what is the assembly? And that means they're not engaged, and that means we're not engaging with them and hearing their views. So it's sort of this like trying to create this cycle of communication that, I think is really important. And Barbara and I have been talking about since I had elected this, not necessarily in a scrolling agenda format, but something about when you walk in, seeing where you are in the meeting. And if the order of the day has changed, people know it. Or if something's been passed, they can see that, so they don't have to, kind of sidle up next to a buddy and say, what's going on? I'm confused, and just making it more transparent. And so I just want to say that because I think a lot of these things are things we've been talking about for quite a while, but we've made it more comprehensive and are starting to think about how we could make a position in the clerk's office that could do these things that would really be better for us and the public.
Yeah, thanks. Pete?
Thank you. So if we're sending out newsletters and tweets, who are we sending those to?
So,
and where do we get the list or whatever?
So right now, Felix has created a great newsletter for Midtown, and that goes out via the FCC attached to Community Council's agendas.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about yesterday how we can utilize the FCC to kind of push out some information as well. I don't think I guess it would be number 3. Circulate the what's ahead via FCC or push it out via the clerks. So you kind of know what's coming up. We know what's coming up. Why doesn't everybody know what's coming up? So it would be a discussion maybe with the FCC, but also there's a great dual benefit to that. If we tell folks that we're pushing out information via the FCC, they may be more likely to sign up for the FCC's newsletters and be learning more about their community council at the same time. So we can kind of feed into each other.
Yeah, Chris.
I would offer, now that I think about it, the FCC, do they send out our agendas? They really don't. And so,
They do not
I don't
send out
get them.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
right, and so I think on top of the what's ahead, we should also drive them to send out to the whole municipality our final agenda when it's time for a meeting, so that the public has that in their hands at their will. That's at least the next step along with the what's ahead.
I just wanted
Yeah, go ahead.
to comment on what Chris said. I think actually recently, once the FCC did send out the agenda, I send out the PDF and then the link to all the community councils so that they have that and can access the documents. But if it goes out through the FCC, I think that would be helpful too.
Way broader. Just
Yeah.
and regular, so people can start to see that it's coming. And I don't understand why we don't do that. It's pretty basic.
Got it. This one I'm pretty excited about because we were talking about it. Number 2 there, create an auto reply to the mass email that contains individual district info contacts and refers members back to the members info page. So we all get lots of emails. We don't always know if it's in our district or not. So then they emailed us all, but then they can see, maybe identify who's in their district or follow up. And they're automatically getting a response because it may be a day before anybody gets back to them and they wonder, did their email go into the black hole? I noticed I got, in my personal life, I emailed AMATS and I got an autoresponder, which was really helpful to know because it was a generic email that I got a response. So.
Could I add to that? That other than the info, I think we should also, like, the information on the back of our business cards, that information, which is in all the departments and their phone number contacts, should be in that auto response, so that the email that they get is information rich for a self-starting person. It's all in one place, and could be even the link for the homeless camp. All of those things that we've been working on to improve how people can access, it should all be in that auto response.
And it kind of originated in, we get these messages, we don't know where people live, we don't know, do you know if someone else is writing them back? And so, at first we're like, do we take turns writing back? And then, but this kind of takes care of it, that you can respond if you want, but in either case, they know who they can talk to if they want to really get more into it. So that's a great idea.
Plus, some people are confused when they find out there's 2 people
Yeah.
representing their district. They
Yeah.
go, so do I get a hold of Forrest, or is
Right.
it you? Or is it both of you?
You say
They don't know.
Forrest. Just kidding.
It depends on who gets to the email.
Oh, he
first.
handles all the emails.
No, they all say talk to Chris.
That's what I say. You're in West Anchorage? Chris is really
We had a couple of long-term goals. or midterm goals, an accessibility portal or some kind of web page design. Our public interface needs to be better in terms of online, where you can really go and find what we're doing, what we've been doing, and kind of get directives of where you need to go, and also potentially an email counterpart to public notices like the state has. Chris mentioned that they go out on a daily basis, all the public notices listed. And that may not be something for us, that might actually be something for the administration to do, but we should kind of guide them toward doing that.
If I could, both of those items are fourth floor issues, IT, and I have been in conversation with them, and they are working on some of this, but it might be beneficial for us to, at some point in the not too distant future, host a work session between us and the fourth floor, asking the question in public open session, what's the work plan, what's the timeline, what are the deliverables, how do we get there? So I think that's the short term of the long term, is to bring Susie in and let's have that talk together.
Okay.
The question.
Yeah, Suzanne.
So Meg, I remember you talking about having access to a webpage or something to dump documents, and because that comes up a lot where we want, to be able to point people to, okay, go get it here, and I feel bad always asking the clerk's office, hey, can you put this somewhere? Did you guys explore that further in your conversations?
That's the idea of an accessibility portal, like to be broad, to be all, okay, it would be really broad in that discussion, like could it be like the ordinances actually passed, or get you pointed to the right place to find like the training PowerPoints and the informational documents.
Is there something in the short term? Because I feel like this might, since we're going to involve IT, take a long time.
In the short term, I had inquired about whether or not we could have individual member web pages, and Dee was looking into it, and I haven't heard back.
So that's going to also be the fourth floor. I assure you, they're the ones who will structure any new framework for us to, even if it's a similar framework for us to engage.
And the reason I asked about those was because I want a place that maybe I could talk more in depth about policy or highlight something, and I don't feel like Facebook's the place to do that.
Yeah, and even just sharing information with people. It's not the best practice to send out these very heavily loaded emails. Links, of course, are much better for the system and everything. So, okay. I don't know what a short-term solution might be. FTP site.
Meet with the IT department and get them in here and have them tell us what we can do. I think that's the short term. We can get on the table, short, medium, and long term, ways to engage.
My question is, if from our members page, if there's even just a way we can have a place where we can dump heavier things individually, like we're the ones saying we own this, then that way you could send those links out, right? Because there are some things I would like to be able to say or do, and in writing communication. I think that's the kind of the conundrum I run into is I'm a written communicator, love the email, but there's no platform for really great written communication with folks. So, and then I would say the only thing, going back to the notes from the communications that we didn't necessarily get to maybe it gets to it, but we didn't really get fully into removing the barriers to participation. That was like participation in government, participation in what we do. We did a little bit by just people knowing our calendar a bit better, but that was
understanding the agenda.
And understanding the agenda, but we didn't get into in terms of like any substantive participation, just simply knowing where and when.
I could add that related to that, we're still working on this Title II update, and that does move some public comment to the beginning of the meeting, so that is a change to,
Cool.
Sorry, that's taking so long. We keep getting new things. People are like, why don't you add this? And why don't you?
Okay, great. Well, thank you for putting this together. Any other thoughts on it?
I can go back and revise what was said, put in the email and kick it over to you. I'm sure you have some preceding paragraphs you might want to add to it.
Yeah, and I guess that's a discussion that we can talk about now. So I don't know if this necessarily needs to look like the other really policy-driven, data-driven issues that we're working on. So how do we want this to look once it's in the final package? Do we want to talk about sort of traditionally what's been the communication platforms the Assembly has used? I think it'd be important to talk about the, whatever the 2012, 2013 report that came out, the Citizens Task Force report on the public process communications, whatever that was. And then really, I think just outlining these goals, I think that's pretty much it. I don't think we need to look at expanding it much more.
Would it make sense to put the communications, however you're envisioning the packet, kind of toward the front, is that it facilitates all the other work? I mean, I think it's a key piece of all the other work, so that's just a thought. So that way it would explain why there's maybe not as much introduction. It's just like, these are things we want to do because it will help us envision or help us achieve all the rest of our goals more effectively.
Yeah, we can look at doing that.
Will you also include like a cost estimate?
I'm waiting for the cost estimate. Actually, we may be talking about that here really shortly, about a public engagement officer versus a consultant.
And hours for whatever would end up on the clerk's office to support any of these other aspects.
The whole idea of what the short-term goal here is somebody 40 hours full-time to do all of these types of things we're talking about, so that we have a dedicated communications person, maybe dedicated / with the minutes clerk or something like that. Barbara and Jennifer were able to talk with us that if another position were to go into the clerk's office, if we decided that's the route we wanted to go. Jennifer has a background in media, so there would be some shifting of responsibilities. They're all pretty flexible up there, but they would be able to wholesale take that on with one more position, plus make sure the minutes clerk continued to be a thing that happened. So they tied those two somewhat together.
And just to explain some of the minutes clerk thing, they haven't been doing minutes for about a year, which is another way the public can't tell what happened at our meetings. And I might be off a year, 10 months, okay.
Catching up.
And then hired someone who's a temporary person that they're paying an hourly wage, but he can't stay long term, and there are other needs. And so as we just started talking about all of these things we want to do and how there isn't capacity for any of them, it sort of started becoming clear that maybe we need this position that can really tell her story and engage the public.
Some people think there's some sort of conspiracy going on that we're trying to hide what it is that we're doing by not creating the minutes from our meetings.
Yeah.
Although I don't know why anyone would want to go to those meetings unless they, need help getting to sleep, but.
So I think we're moving into the second part of our conversation that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
And, what is the plan for our department? And it was interesting, a conversation that was had. It appears that the clerk's office requested a position to be added in the budget. And the funds it was supposed to be net zero, no increased budget. The funds that were supposed to be for that position, the administration, either inadvertently or on purpose, moved it into postage. And so, basically, we may need to move that out of postage if in the S version the administration doesn't figure that out. And so we want to have that conversation probably with the administration in relationship to our budget, because
Desiree's trying to
We have postage in our budget?
interject something.
please. Yep.
That was probably an inadvertent mistake. We asked for a new position for the election coordinator too, and our intent was to take some of our election labor funds that we already have budgeted and use that to create a new position. And simultaneously, we were also asking for increases to postage and printing for vote by mail, since those expenses are going up. The administration got in touch with us to do a net zero, and they didn't go, we're not giving you the election coordinator position. They were like, oh, let's do this in the system because we're taking some money from labor and we're increasing your vote by mail, and they balance out. So it was a little bit of a, I think, inadvertent mistake that we didn't get the full picture until the budget was actually given to you guys, and that net zero happened prior to that. But since then, that's been fixed. Our labor line is back where it was. I mean, vote by mail budget did not increase or anything like that. so it went back to status quo essentially.
So, yeah, last night I heard that there's still concern about the labor budget, so.
From Barbara.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get there.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We're worried about needing to go to a second page in the valley. If that happens, we would need to supplement additional postage.
Mhm. Yep. All right, so before we move on to that, though, anything else on communications?
So what's the appropriate next step? Or should we together draft that goals thing, or
I was just gonna edit
Emails.
this.
the email's cool?
Yeah, so I would say edit it, send it to me, and then I'll just put it in the package of things.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did we?
You're gonna do it? Thank you, Felix.
Did we come up with a preamble, like a constitutional statement?
You can do that too, Felix.
That was, well, so a intro was on my to-do.
I have
of-
2-sentence intro on
Sure.
the Word document, not the email. I'll include, and then you can do with it as you
Yeah, because I think that's one last conversation we should have is when it gets close to that point, and let's all make sure we agree on the statement of position at the beginning of the document, so
Sure.
that everything that flows is as unified as can be.
Sure, yeah, we can look specifically at the preamble, as you call it, during our end of the month Rules Committee meeting. We can add that on there.
Can I just,
Yeah.
to the point about how this will be covered, I guess my question came from hire a full-time public engagement officer, and then the line below can be combined with the minutes clerk function. So I guess I'm not clear on if this is envisioned to be a full-time thing, or is that the backup plan to combine it? It just seems like it would, I mean, as far as like
So
the.
what was expressed to us yesterday was that the clerk's department isn't going to bank on finding the perfect person who has all of the assets to be both a minutes clerk and a communications expert, but having the additional labor pool, they can, within the department, figure out who is right for the job today, but they need the additional human power in order to be able to accomplish any additional work. And so basically the ask is an additional body that has some skills along the lines of data and communications, or mostly data, mostly communications, but we need another body to be able to get all that work done.
And they might rearrange a bit.
Internally, they have the skills and assets that they'll tap into, each in their strength.
But then they could do all of these things.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one if you want to pass it out, and then join us at the table. So, at a Rules Committee meeting a couple of months back, we learned of all of the duties assigned to various positions in the clerk's office. And I think for some of us it was pretty enlightening to see all of the things that some of our staff do, the multiple jobs and hats that they are required to do. So to continue the discussion, I think it's important for us to have a clear understanding of what's in the Assembly, Clerk, and Council's budgets and what isn't in it. And so Desiree, Suzanne, and I are going to tag team a presentation on the different budgets, requests that we made that didn't get included in the budget, and where we want to go from here and have that discussion. I'll just talk sort of briefly before we start about first the goals that Suzanne and I had when we first started our term as leadership, and how that plays into this. And then second, just a very brief, we can go into more detail, the conversations that we've had with the administration leading up to now. So first, when Suzanne and I were first elected as chair and vice chair, we talked about what it is that we want to do. What are some 3 concrete things that we can get done? First, we talked about the communication with the administration and how we can work on bettering that communication and having, frankly, a more equal playing field when it comes to communicating with the administration. I think we've worked pretty well on that one. Second, we've talked about specifically when it comes to assembly members, how can we collaborate better? And I think we've spent several months working on a lot of things to do that. And then third, which goes really into what we're going to be doing next, our final goal was what can we do, the assembly and all of its constituent parts, to really ramp up our ability to serve the public, to serve our constituents, and to do our jobs. And so to that end, we developed, I asked Barbara to develop a pretty robust budget for us to be able to do certain things, to expand our capabilities to better do our jobs, and for the clerk's office to better be able to do its job and serve us and serve the public. And she developed that budget in tandem with Suzanne and I and Desiree and Dean, and we'll go into the details in a minute, but the discussions that we had with the administration initially, I think were very encouraging. We thought that the administration would be able to work and sort of find a way to make some of these things happen. And then sort of reality set in, and it's part of the reason why everyone has this document here. The administration's view on this is that there are only a certain limited number of priorities that can actually be funded in the budget, and so we, the policymakers, need to choose those priorities. And so if you want things in the clerk's office budget, then you need to consider other things that you've deemed as priorities and weigh them against each other. And
I think we have a number of us.
So that's the discussion, how it went with the administration. We can get into more detail on that, but let's start, I think.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just about this memo that you gave us.
Uh-huh.
On the second page, the second full option down, behavioral health analyst.
Yes.
That actually was not included, right? So even though it says included in the budget.
That was so initially when we got this memo, it was clear, and then when the budget came out, then it was not
So
clear.
just so folks know, you could correct that on your copy, because I know that's something that Suzanne and I and Meg and maybe others are interested in looking at.
Yep. Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the two easy ones, and then we'll go to the clerk's office budget. So let's start with the Assembly Council's budget. I can talk about that one if you want.
Sure.
Okay, so for the Assembly Council's budget, the discussions that we had was basically increasing their positions from 2 to 3. So there's there's dean, and then there's an administrative assistant type position, and then we had talked about adding a third position being a paralegal. In the end, I think after talking with Dean, what was decided was we would just take out the administrative assistant position and just have dean and a paralegal. So and basically the way we're doing that is just upping the salary of the administrative assistant position to compensate for what a paralegal would get. And so Dean, not to steal your thunder, but you've been interviewing several folks who have the paralegal experience, and so hopefully soon you should have someone hired that's a paralegal. Yeah, go ahead.
I did 4 applicants, I 12 applicants, and for really phenomenal experience and background, it seems I was very high quality applicants this time. So I interviewed 4 people the past 2 days, and I hope to select 2 for a second interview. Make a decision by the end of the week. But I'm impressed with the applicants I have, so I think I'll have very good quality paralegal within a few weeks.
Great. Meg?
Thank you. Is there any cost when we have a legal intern over the summer or a law clerk? And did we include that in the budget? Because that was fantastic, and I would like that to be a resource for Dean if he so wants it in future summers.
So we gave Sadie a stipend of $1,500
For the summer or for the month?
for the summer, for the whole summer.
Whoa.
Okay.
And that was partly travel. I believe it was 500 travel and 1,000 for work. I don't think the legal department actually gives stipends at all to any of their interns, so we have a little bit of a benefit for applicants. I requested $4,500 to be added to Dean's budget for the purpose of having 3 interns, so we could have a decent cycle through the year, but that was not included in the proposed budget.
That is like one of the lowest legal
Yeah.
work stipends I've ever heard of.
And lowest hanging fruit for inclusion in a budget.
Yeah. Dean, did you want to add on that?
Oh, yeah, we actually have an intern from Ed that applied to the law department. They referred to us. So we might have one for the January to April semester. If we have the funding.
And can I ask, I have one follow-up question. Do we know what the municipal attorney's office pays its law clerks, or is it the same amount?
So I don't know
Interns.
about their actual employees, but I know that they also use interns and their interns do not receive anything.
So
Sorry,
this might be, so the law students we have over the summer, we don't really pay them, we simply just give them a little bit of money, like $1,500, and we think that's equal between the Assembly Council's office and the municipal attorney's office?
In the
or
attorney,
no?
they don't.
They don't get
They don't pay anything?
They don't get anything.
It is.
Zero.
My
It may be
one out
legal, but
here,
not right.
I did a free thing.
Internship.
Well,
I thought the law changed.
Are you
Oh, that's true. I'm old.
Those are
Sorry.
law clerk kind of interns in the summer, or those
Yeah.
are like the UAA interns that run throughout
Summer
the
law
year?
clerks.
I am not sure. I know that we got Sadie from the poll from legal ABT
Bar
to clarify.
Yes. So one attorney in the law department, they solicit applications for their summer intern,
Yeah.
summer legal interns, and one attorney interviews applicants, and they select them from some law schools like the University of Puget Sound, New Hampshire, Vermont Law School,
Yeah.
Lewis and Clark, Northwestern School of Law, my alumni, and so we get good quality law interns usually. And last summer, I actually, one person there said that I made them look bad because they don't pay their law interns anything. They don't pay hours as good. So I think we have good arrangement.
Yes, go ahead.
They're called
Dean,
indentured servants. Millennials work
Dean,
for free.
can you speak to whether you have the capacity to manage 3 legal interns, and is that something you want over the summer?
Oh yeah, I loved having Sadie work for us last summer. It was great.
Okay, and you would want more if you could?
Oh, more than one?
Yeah.
I think one year.
Because
I think what Desiree was talking about was phasing them, so having one in the fall, one in the
One at a time.
summer.
So,
yeah.
at least this is from when I went to law school, which Meg has reminded me as a while ago. I turned 40 last week. But when you do it during school, usually you get credit. And when you do it during summer, it's a job because there's no school going on and you would get paid, generally. Some summer internships are unpaid, but I don't know if we either can or should offer a stipend during the year. I understand the reason for doing it, but I actually don't know if the schools, like, maybe you could pay for travel or something, but does anyone know?
Well, I'm also surprised that we're able to get an intern during the school year. There's no law school in Alaska.
Yeah.
There's the
Yeah.
Seattle U kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a small handful of kids, and they have other.
Third year law.
Okay, if I might, I think we're down a rabbit hole, and I think that we should, if we want to have a conversation about interns and how we pay them, awesome.
Well, I think we're just trying to figure out if we're gonna make an amendment to the budget, right? So, like, if that number isn't realistic, I mean, we could just do that number
Right,
and
and-
make it work, but.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks. Anything else to add on that before we move on, Dean?
Can I ask one
No,
more
the
question?
4,500 sounds perfect for an intern, throughout 2 semesters in summer.
Okay. Yeah. Austin.
Dean, so for a while we had talked about sort of your capacity and the amount of hours you're working, and whether you, I think Felix was even exploring, did we need a second attorney? And I know that you work far more than full-time. And so has it helped that we're using, don't do that, I know it's true. Is it, yes, it is true. Good job, Trigo. Is it helpful that we've been using the municipal attorney's office more? I mean, I tend to work a lot with Dean Quincy. I know Quincy has a fair amount of time to work with others. Like, she's always available and interested in working with, she's gonna hate me for saying that, but, so is that working? Or do you, I mean, how sustainable is your workload? Like, I don't want you to leave, and sometimes I worry about that.
Yes, it is helpful, and I have at various times asked the law department if they can take on some projects and ask them to do because they have expertise or capacity. So that has been very helpful. I do like to stay on top of it, maybe as a reviewer, just so I can manage what our assembly members are asking for, and just track what's happening with the law departments. But it's very helpful to engage in projects, so I'll continue to do that.
And that seems like a sustainable workload and situation. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm worried about.
Yes, I'm like, I'm enjoying this burning out.
And that's what the paralegal is for, right? The second position of paralegal is
Yeah,
intended to.
paralegals do different work. I mean, just, they don't do this legal analysis, and they're not gonna draft things in the same.
Sort of. They
Yeah.
can prepare
Yeah.
maybe from templates and some draft, but it really takes.
No, I understand that, but
20 to dig in.
if we're going from having just Dean to Dean and not an assistant but a legal paralegal,
Yeah.
that actually is a huge asset.
It's really different, actually. Like,
It's a
just
lot of
Okay, so then
speaking
we
from
don't need a
lawyer.
paralegal. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I'm not trying to make this combative, I'm
No,
just
I
saying
think
having a
it's
lawyer
just
is different.
paralegal
Yeah.
in my
Right.
office. What I did have when I was a lot more productive, you know, I mean, I do spend a lot of time now scheduling, and that was very helpful to have the paralegal take over scheduling meetings and translating services and so forth, as well as organizing files and all that.
Chris,
So-
maybe it would be like
Take huge bulk of my
assistant,
time.
paralegal, lawyer, right? So it's like, it's a little better, but it's still, but it's okay if you're saying we're good and that system works and we can use community law, and if that works, that's great. I just don't want Dean to work 80 hours a week and then leave.
There are times when I won't get things done, and that's when, you know, I'm not going to burn me out because I don't deep in some projects. Part of it's prioritizing. So it's, and I apologize if I don't get some things done for which you want, but they take longer and priorities are all shifting. So it's part of managing that. You know what, if you had one attorney for each of you, we can accomplish a lot more, but realistically, we stay within our traditional budget. And if you think about it, my office has, I think, since it was formed in 2001, 2002, we had one attorney, one legal assistant. So I think to grow beyond that is a major budget change.
All right, thank
That's
you.
what we do here, though.
Yeah, that's true. Right. So that's the council's budget. Then moving on to the assembly budget. So the one thing that we had looked at and didn't get included in the budget there was upping our aids. So right now it's the pool that we have is $11,400. And we can decide what we want to do with that. We can put that 100% to AIDS, 50% to AIDS, 50% to something else, whatever configuration. So I had looked at basically a little bit more than doubling that to $24,000, so that we can get true part-time aides. And Desiree keeps calling them full-time aides. But, yeah, part-time aides. And
Contractors.
there we go. And that was not included in the budget.
So
And
is
so
anyone-
that would be an increase of about $140,000 roughly
Between which things?
to get the between
Just the aid.
what we have now and then to a true part-time, 140,000.
So is this an appropriate place to talk about if anyone's planning to bring that as a budget amendment?
Yeah, so I can talk about what I am planning to bring forward as budget amendments. So right now, because I've been working on it with the clerks, I'm planning on bringing forward the assembly aides. I'm planning on bringing forward the election coordinator, and I'm planning on bringing forward the vote by mail. Those are 3
What's a
ones.
vote by mail is like
Well,
stuff they need? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to those 2 other ones when we talk about the clerk's office budget.
Can I ask, what's the funding source for this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So right now, some of the stuff we're looking at maybe just making it work within the budget, and we'll talk about that. And then some of it's cutting other things that maybe we won't want to cut, but that's a discussion that we'll have. I mean, there's no other decision to make. Right. Okay, any questions on assembly budget? That's the only thing that we had looked at changing. It was just that simple.
So for the assembly budget, it's just the aid piece.
Uh-huh. Yep. All right, so.
And then sorry, Felix, so if we wanted to propose this minutes clerk, public information officer kind of position, that would be on top of
That's
this.
not-
That would be in the clerk's office budget.
Oh, okay, I see, this
Yeah.
is assembly.
So it's the assembly department,
Right.
but there's council, ombudsman, clerk's office, and the assembly.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry we don't have all that in front of us right now, kind of layout. Do we?
Yeah,
Bring it
so.
on the binder, would that help?
Yeah, so actually, I was
I
going to
have
propose,
one.
because I need to take a quick break. 5 minutes, and then we can talk clerk, because that's going to be the big one.
Okay, great.
I'll grab my binder too.
No,
but,
it's probably. So I
We were talking about like.
Just the breakdown of the departments, you know, where the
Yeah.
money's at, where the positions are at. Is that an easy way to know where they're at?
Yes, do you know?
One's got-
But the
one's
part
got-
of the assembly covered, their budget covers those 4 things. Then, plus funds, plus funds. And if I was confusing you, and then when they were the moment, right, well, yeah. And my manager was, yeah. No, it was fine, it was a very end of the presentation.
This will be on the half year this year.
Okay, great.
Because then when he said, after he dumped. For the, yes, I don't know what it was. I didn't hear the number on that one, but that was for their part, yes, for their.
Did not compute because rejected.
I like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Can I trouble you, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just taking one. Yeah, and that's for their aides, you know, like they said, there's their aides, yes. They get paid such a little amount of money. He knows, yeah, but I know it's all.
And that's like the break.
And then this is this position, and then that's which would then, which if we reduce, if we reduce the staff to the one, this would almost make it, because we'd be at 48, and it's supposed to be 42, because we're more yeah.
And so,
Yeah, that's not the aids, which I like that idea, because right now our aids, we can't see use them. I'm not even using it right now, because it's usually I use her 4 hours a week, you know, it's hard, and so I thought, oh, I should get her to do this.
So, because she made art.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember talking to people. They might have started. I think there's something for our aides, to work together, because we do have some, we need to talk to some of our.
So you're going to seconds, and then,
And we usually have an intern.
Which one?
I need the little C aids. Yeah, I feel like, we don't have that enough to work, so then, again, I'm going to community council.
I'm sure you think it's kind of like, almost the next episode.
Sorry?
Don't do this, just get it done, and then make sure you know, make sure you think it's fair.
so really though, this is.
I know, and Judy said she'd work more hours, but I'm like, I don't want you to mention that.
Keep that close.
You know, we have a really tight budget, so I can see why they didn't include the additional money for AIDS. And so I think what we may have to do is go together with the other person from the district and have one aid between the two of you to work on things in District 5 and District 3 and whatever. And I, you know,
My ghost
I know that's
assistant.
not optimal.
Well, maybe you'll get a whole A or one showing us.
No, we'll work that way.
It might be 1A for district.
So, the other piece is the wage increases that, I think we need to address. And, yes, the fact is, our department is being given 1.5% increases, and the administration is giving themselves 5%. And, ours was requested that they get a payroll increase, but they got screwed, and so it's our job to protect our own.
I think, I actually think that there's other ways to find money so we can
And if we can't find the money, then I think what we do is we split the difference. The 5% upstairs gets divided so that it's equitable to this floor and that floor. You know what I mean? Like, we send the message back, it's not fair for you to take care of your own and not to take care of the clerk. And so we'll do that by reducing the amount available to you to do that and moving that to, right? If we can't find an increase, then what we'll do is take half and put it there, or whatever the difference is. So upstairs, on the increases for their variable positions, like the analyst upstairs is getting a 5% increase, right? Ours is getting a 1.5% increase. So take the difference, which is 3.5%. Cut that in half so it gets equitable, equal increases up there to down here. Oh, 20,000 less. 20, yeah, 20,000 less. Huh?
And that's still, I know.
that are way. Actually, I think my first job up here, I got paid $32,500. Well, that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
And I thought I was rolling in the dough.
Yeah, I remember
because I was right out
I
of
got a
school.
30-some-thousand
We were able to
job.
do
Like,
it.
oh my God.
We got an apartment with utilities included. We moved up here. My husband went to school full time. He didn't work. And we was
So you were supporting,
We had gas healthcare though, like for the two of us.
that's what it all
For
comes down to.
healthcare, I paid $100 a month. That was it.
I really wish Fred was here.
And the deductible was like.
Do you know where he's at? 'Cause I think he'd have a lot to say in this discussion.
It was hard to.
That sounds like Iowa money.
Yeah,
it does.
definitely. I'm still amazed when I talk to my sister about what they make in Iowa, but her house costs like
I know,
$80,000.
but home costs there are insane.
Just wait a minute for Meg to come back.
You had a good group, you guys.
Okay.
I
No, you're right.
We have a really good group.
I
We have
agree.
a really engaged, smart, kind group.
Good looking.
I wasn't gonna go there. Now I should. I mean, look at that photo. You know what? Forrest,
How
you
about
look
exhausted?
very tall.
I'm with
You
Crystal.
were not taller than Fred.
It's
like
more going, I
making
really
sure
need to
front.
wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate
That's
that.
at the top of my list, too.
Right? I was looking at it yesterday. I was like, Forrest looks like the
We're
tallest
painting our
guy.
house
And
right
that is
now,
not
doing
the
earthquake
case.
damage repair.
I mean,
So
Fred must be like
I'm not
6'2".
doing this stuff. I run home and paint and move furniture and take
Yeah.
walk. Anyway, it's just
Yeah.
been nonstop. So.
Cameron
That's a
has to
big
be
job.
6'1" or
Yeah,
something.
it is. I'm trying to get it all, well, most of it done before the holidays. Anyway.
Holidays.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, I seem to have
Did you have a
going
lot of
into
damage?
one.
Get more tired.
Here's the money.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Did you have a lot of damage?
We had a lot of sheetrock damage, we're just repairing all the drywall
Yeah.
cracks, around the windows. We have a couple that
Right.
go floor to ceiling where the
Right.
whole sheetrock line is cracked all the way down. But, so it's just messy, it's kind of inconvenient.
We have,
We went for 2 years with a hole in our sheetrock. It wasn't from an earthquake,
Yeah.
but a kid running too fast.
Yeah, I had windows in my son's room. No, I think, my son said a chair caused it, he did.
That's great. All right. Okay, so before we go into the clerk's office, and I'm going to let Desiree take the lead on this one, we do have this packet of information that's specifically around the clerk's office budget. wanted to provide a little bit more of an in-depth answer to Forrest's question on where the heck are you finding the money for this. So I don't know if this has been sort of one of the quandaries of Assembly members for the longest time is how the heck do we make budget cuts? Some members in the past have done sort of 1% across the board to pay for something. Others have taken out a specific category, let's say supply, and reduced supplies by 5% across the board. And none of those tactics have ever really had that much success before on the Assembly. So what I did is I looked, again, this is a priorities game. I looked at all of the changes in the 2020 budget. And so in your budgets, it's clearly outlined for each department what's being added into the 2020 budget. And I just made a priority call. What are we going to get funded? And that was the first thing that I did. Second thing that I did is looked at, again, hasn't worked in the past, but looked at the categories and looked specifically at travel and supplies, and if there was a big increase, then made the decision of let's live within our means if we want to fund other priorities. Not fun. Desiree.
So, you guys should have a packet that starts with a little letter. This is from Barbara on justifications for what the clerk's office has asked for. You guys touched a little bit on the election coordinator position and the minutes clerk / media position. And so I can tell you that when we sent our budget request to OMB, the clerk's office made a few requests. Here's my little reference. Generally speaking, we asked for about a $70,000 increase to elections for vote-by-mail services. Like I mentioned earlier, it's primarily postage and printing. Our voter registration has increased from 218,000 people to about 235,000 people, and with vote-by-mail, it's the nature of the beast, supplies, and running the project is just expensive. And we have already blown our postage and printing budget this year, and so the increases that we were requested were based off of our actuals for 19. So we just requested that, but the administration did not put that in the 2020 proposed budget. We asked for an election coordinator to be the main person to handle GIS and more of the specialized IT data technology functions of elections. Yet again, vote by mail has changed the game. We've got the envelope system, a tabulation system, different machines, and so the election coordinator that we asked for would be primarily responsible for these functions. So Barbara wouldn't have to do it, because when election season comes on, Barbara disappears from the clerk's office and is essentially doing elections, which of course she is the clerk, so she should be facilitating, but it's really stretching her thin. And you talk about Dean working 80 hours, Barbara probably works an insane amount of hours during an election season. Barbara.
Yes, all the time.
All the time, but in elections it ramps up even more. So we asked.
She's the other one I'm worried about.
We asked for the election coordinator 2 position. We were going to take about $75,000 from our current election labor budget and use the $75,000 and ask for $30,000 in the proposed budget, so we can get, $105 for an election coordinator. That was not added into the proposed budget. We asked for a minutes clerk.
Actually, before we do that,
Okay.
So Barbara had one more last-minute addition to this that she did this morning, which was the duties of the election coordinator right now are performed both by the clerk and the project manager, which is a consultant that we have, RDI, Dennis Wheeler, that's right. And so if we had the election coordinator, it could potentially save money because we could reduce the contract with RDI.
We asked for a minutes clerk. you can see that we previously had a minutes clerk, and then budgets were cut. That position was cut from the department and was absorbed essentially into the legal assistant position under Dean's office. Staffing issues and just work issues. Minutes have been behind. They were about a year or so behind. We're at 10 months probably right now behind. So we asked for a full-time minutes clerk at approximately $84,000, so your salary, your benefits, all of that, to help with this. And then, of course, the minutes clerk would also be doing double duty with the media or whatever else. Like you said, our office is fairly flexible, and we move around assignments that fit the appropriate parties. So that would be our minutes clerk. That was not included in the 2020 proposed budget.
Yeah, go
Can I ask
ahead.
a question specifically about that?
Sure.
Thanks. The minutes clerk is obviously transcribing the audio and putting that into a document. Have you ever looked into just finding whether or not there's some software that actually accomplishes the same thing? Because I'm just thinking in terms of, when you watch something on television, there's such a thing as closed caption that automatically writes out the words. And is there anything like that would exist that we could actually use that would kind of be pretty spontaneous?
So
Somebody
Jennifer wants to
practicing
add
that.
to that.
The minutes of the assembly are actually what we call action minutes. So it's not verbatim, it's not taking down necessarily what everybody says, it's more the action of the legislation that's happening. And so I don't know that software would work to capture that, because as you know, there's a lot of back and forth with the minutes, and so I don't know that would.
But it might be something that could be used together. I mean, it could be something that somebody could have already printed out and then go back through as a clerk and put in the times when you need to stop and take the vote and put that in the document. But anyway, I was just kind of throwing that out because I was just wondering if there's a quicker, faster way to do that.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I believe that the implementation of the new meeting manager system is going to have a much higher functionality for these kind of issues. That's the tracking, I think, will come through that, but it still has to be gone through and verified by somebody to make sure that the records are accurate.
Well, and maybe in keeping with that, then maybe it's not really a full-time position either. So, I don't know. Just throwing
Yeah, you're right. I think that the minutes clerk would definitely have other duties, and some of the stuff that was talked about in the communication board, some of that could be wrapped in. And you're right, it would be other duties as well in the clerk's office.
Dean?
Just to clarify, what I know about the closed captioning industry, the captions on TV are produced automatically by software. They have some like reporting sort of system that produces the captions. It's usually paid from, I think, the television stations for that company. So there is some software that does some automatic, I guess, text translation, but it's not very accurate. I would rely on it for that minutes.
Right. Well, you would always have to. It's like autocorrect. Sometimes you have no idea why you got the word that you did, but you have to have somebody. Exactly. Sure. Yeah. But I was just thinking in terms of saving time and something that could be more technically oriented that might save time and money.
Thank you. Desiree?
So.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Pete.
I know, I was just gonna say, I've been on this assembly for 5.5 years. There are a couple fewer clerks in the clerk's office compared to when I started here. If you walk through there, you can see there's empty desks. There used to be people sitting at those desks, and they were busy people. And now all of those jobs have been, absorbed into fewer positions. And so, I'm adding another person that would help, be able to do some of those functions with what I think would be great.
Crystal?
So, and just another comment, I guess, and it is interesting that the more we use technology, it seems like the more people it takes to actually manage it. It's supposed to make things simpler, quicker, easier, whatever, but it's just amazing how really intensive it is for just people working. So.
Well, I would just offer a counterpoint to that. I communicate with, I've recently learned 4,000 people in 3 months which if I had to do that by letter and post, would be more than a full-time job. So the technology isn't working. It's just constrained by challenges.
I
getting it
agree.
up to speed.
But when you look at all the people that are actually behind the scenes making that work, is
Right.
kind of what I was getting at,
Yeah.
is it's still a pretty people intensive.
Yeah, it definitely takes people. Thanks.
So,
I just felt something.
yeah. Back onto the minutes clerk, we do have 2 part-time employees who are working on minutes right now. So we are trying to get our backlog taken care of, but ideally, we would like a new minutes clerk position. Like Jennifer's mentioned, it would be probably half-time minutes clerk, half-time other duties in the office, but there's plenty of stuff that we do that we can spread onto another employee. There's a bullet about time analysis, just to demonstrate how we function in the clerk's office. Just a little bit of background is a little snapshot, it's a 2-week snapshot of our employees, and you'll see it in the little pie charts, just because it should be easy to understand, I think. And we've got it separated by what actual duties were, and then what the duties of the position was by code and non-code. So,
Meg?
Why is the homelessness committee showing up on both of these charts as taking up like a substantial amount of time?
so for committees, there's the actual sit-down staff time. There's the before and after prep time. There's the emailing with the chairs to verify agendas, gathering documents, like the actual just printing administrative time.
You need, I guess my comment will be is if we're using an outsized amount of time, tell us and tell us what we're doing wrong or how we could be better. Because yeah, we don't know unless you tell us. We're both new members in particular, and if we're doing something that's out of the ordinary, please let us know.
I think it might be because you guys are working your butts off and trying to make the committee better. And
I don't know that we're relying on the clerk's office
Right.
very much
Yeah.
for what we're doing. So I'm just wanting to make sure, because that both of those caught my eye, like, whoa. So if there's some way we can help you, please let us know, because we don't want to be the committee on the pie chart. And we want to make sure we're being really cognizant of that, because we do know you guys are very
Right.
busy.
And
So.
you're
like
even more important than lunch.
Which shouldn't be the case. I mean,
I
as
know
a
it's a
committee.
different person, but.
Speaking of which, Mr. Chair, is there going to be lunch today?
There's going to be lunch today, yes.
Or is that 1%?
But yeah, we do spend a decent amount of time facilitating the committees, and it does depend on the person who's your staffer, and certain members or certain staff members have more committees than others. It does vary, but I personally would say it's a decent amount of time.
Or maybe this is a personal privilege moment or whatever, but just even the name clerk's office is so understated. I mean, because it doesn't reflect the code requirements or the protecting the integrity of the elections, the democratic process, and just, I know that when the more last minute we do things, whether it's a resolution for recognition or an amendment, I mean, that increases the cost, is my understanding. And that there's a cost to every meeting, whether it's a special meeting or a committee meeting, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that, and easy to lose sight of the pressure it puts on the clerk's department staff. So I don't know, I'm not saying we change the name, but it's like the legislative office, or it's much bigger than what the clerk's office name suggests, I think. So anyway, thanks, Felix.
Thanks.
So, little pie charts aside, the staff is, I would say, we handle our time as best as possible, and we try to do everything that's required of our duties, and then whatever you guys throw at us, we try to accommodate as well. Everybody's busy, and certain functions have fallen behind, like minutes, for example, because we don't have the capacity capacity in our office. Maybe our little pie charts, because that's really only 3 people, and it's really only 2 weeks of like September, probably doesn't express or tell you the whole story because of the nature of the information I'm providing. But
Well, there's gotta be other committees, right? Someone already say that?
yes,
I mean, those are
and it's probably just a
So,
timing that the
I wonder if it's
homelessness at that
committees
time.
and it accidentally got marked.
This is just a 2-week.
It's a 2-week
Yeah.
period. That's all it is. Yeah.
Okay, well, sounds like we probably need to cut Meg and Cameron because it's causing a lot of problems. Sorry.
Expensive people.
I mean, we have the clerks with 7 or 8 functions that they're bouncing back and forth
Yeah.
between. And so that has to be challenging for them to manage their time to figure out, let me see, I'm working on this, but then I need to have that done by X amount of time. And
Well, and we can all be pretty demanding, right? I mean, it's like, oh no, I need this by tomorrow, or oh, I need this for this meeting. And they might be working on
Exactly.
something else and are kind of forced for, I mean, imagine having 11 bosses who are sort of high maintenance.
Crystal?
Well, just a comment too, and I imagine it like everything, it ebbs and flows. I mean, there are days that are probably not quite as hectic, but you get right up next to the assembly, the regular meeting days, and it's just gonna be, everything's gonna be a time crunch. I mean, it's just how it works. So I can see where if you're just trying to kind of get a snapshot of a certain time, this might not really be reflective of the entire year's worth of how somebody's time is used. Right.
And like I said, it's just a 2-week period, and I think it was in September, and it's only 3 of the staff members, so very select information. But we try to do our best with what we got, right? And then we come to the wage memo, where we essentially asked for a 5% increase to our salaries for staff members, and
Let me.
Sure, go ahead, Chris.
What you asked for was a comparable salary increase to other similarly situated municipal employees doing similar jobs.
fair, just, and equitable.
Yes,
Yes.
and that did not happen.
We were told that we should handle the raises in a different way, not in the budgeting process, but Barbara and I thought it would be appropriate to budget for the raises.
And the other departments budget for the raises.
I mean, it's kind of, I think, assumed. And
Yeah, it's built in,
yes.
3% plus.
Well, because they
increase.
get raises.
Yes.
And you guys don't.
We are not on a step schedule. No.
Yeah, so that's an important distinction, which I think Chris is trying to make.
Yes, that it's built in, baked in, that those folks do. And you can see the difference. A similar situated position in the clerk's office is making 30% less than someone on the 8th floor, right? About.
it's who you know.
It's a failure of equity. And we have a duty to ensure at least on, in my opinion, the annual cost of living increases, raises, however that is phrased, that our staff are treated fairly compared to other members of the administration and the municipality.
Thank you. Yeah,
The
Chris.
numbers are here.
Where's that map coming from? I don't see it in the presentation here.
Which map are you talking about?
The part where the OMB budget analyst makes 92,000 and the
So there's
assembly analyst makes 73,000.
Yeah, there's a memo, and Barbara did go over this memo with the 8th floor. And I think there was, particularly when she was talking with Becky, I think there was some commiseration and agreement between particularly what our lawyers get versus what they would get in private practice. And so there was commiseration there between what clerk staff gets versus comparables.
Well, but the difference there is these are all people internal to the municipality.
Yes.
They're all part of that $3,000 team that runs this city. And they should be fairly treated. You know, just because they work under a department under the lowest paid employees of the municipality, the assembly, doesn't mean that they should also be similarly the lowest paid employees in their class. They should be fairly and equitably paid.
Well, and it creates a retention issue as
Right.
well, which costs money.
Mhm.
And there's the risk of employees being poached by other departments in the muni. We're not competitive right here.
And so, yeah, we had all of these discussions, which is why we did decide to put this in the budget, was not included. And so now, do you want to talk about, so is there anything else that we asked for that wasn't included?
Let's see, that we asked for that wasn't included. We are working with the administration on getting 155's remodel for the audiovisual taken care of. So that's fine. We asked for the aids that we talked about. That was not included. There were just a couple of minor increases that we asked for that weren't included.
Right, like I think the Ombudsman's office had an increase that wasn't included.
Right.
To add them to the Ombudsman's Association. Yeah, so there were little things here and there that weren't included. I think we did decide to focus on sort of the big picture items that could make systemic change within the office. And so that's what these are. Do you want to talk sort of where we go from here?
Where we go from here is where you guys would like to go from here. I am trying to figure out how we're going to absorb the smaller asks that we put in our request, like the ombudsman's. What I think we asked for maybe $7,000 to be increased for Daryl's budget. That didn't happen. So those kind of things, I'm working with Barbara and Dean and Daryl on figuring out how we're going to facilitate those requests. But as far as the larger ones, it's really up to you guys in the amendment process.
Okay, so I already talked about 3 amendments that I am going to be working on. There's one that we talked about that I forgot about, and no one so far has taken ownership of, which is the interns for the council's office.
Meg's doing a little, she's
math.
doing a little action over here. We're trying to figure it out.
Great. So then I guess this is a sort of broad question. Where do we move forward from here? And then I could just imagine the conversation with the administration is going to be priorities, right? They're going to want to know what our priorities are. So what is the sense of the body here?
It's like the poker game where you don't want to reveal your cards until it's time. That's the dilemma. But
Oh, I'm really bad at poker. I'll just tell you
Okay.
where I've had it. So I think that given the discussions I've heard, I'm really looking into the trail officers' positions and seeing if we could reduce that by 1 and move some of that money around. If my math is correct, it's about $134,000, and as I start to divide it out, it could potentially work toward a public engagement officer minute clerk's position, $1,500 to make sure we at least have a summer intern. And when we talk about interns for the Assembly Council's office, the most important intern to me, and I guess maybe I'm biased because I'm a lawyer, is a law clerk. I think that's really value added because what Sadie produced in terms of potential legislation and ordinance was really, really good. And I think that's at a little bit higher level than someone coming maybe from UAA who's a paralegal intern or another type of intern. And then honestly, with what's left after that math, I'm really interested in supporting the behavior analyst position that the Assembly had put in its priorities, and it got messed up with the homelessness coordinator position. I just don't know if that's an internal position or a contract. So that's where I'm at, and I come kind of close and still a little short if my math is right.
Okay, thanks. Pete?
Thank you. And we were told that the park rangers, trail rangers, whatever you want to call them, will be working in teams of 2. So if we cut 1, then we have an odd man out situation, so to speak.
or it actually might then help to fund the elections position, the missing elements on the other side of the equation. And I think that it's not unreasonable to look closely at those positions and decide.
Yeah,
So,
Suzanne.
those are APD officers, and we need more APD officers. I mean, we heard from the chief that the priorities are what will drive where they're deployed. So we're not, I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of cutting those. calling them something else, yes, but cutting back on more APD staff.
Here's how I would disagree, and this is what we'll have a talk about maybe on Tuesday the 19th, but we have substantially invested in the police force, incredibly substantially. In the term that I've been on this body, they have seen an increase of a substantial percentage of their staff. And of course, we could always use more police and we could always use more fire. And I would be a great advocate for those, but we can't ignore the rest of our city in order to create these pillars of staffing that then we have a well-policed city that doesn't operate. And so what we need to do, I think, is look really carefully at what areas of the city have to expand in support of all of these functions. And I think the clerk's office, as we've seen, is one area that we all depend on to ensure that the lights stay on and that everything keeps working. And so it's a close and important conversation, but if we look at who's grown in the last 5 years, there's really only one department or two.
I would just want to be clear that it's not like we're cutting, park rangers, we would be cutting APD.
But the problem is, we got police when we asked for park rangers. That's like a weird twist that happened.
Not so much. So here's what happened. If we look at it, so there's two categories in here, right? There's, if we look at the memo, there's public safety, and then there was the trail safety officers, right? And very clear what that was supposed to be. And then there was homelessness, park rangers, and we had sort of a definition of what that was. And one was included, one was not included. So it makes sense to me why it was chosen as APD. I think to go a little further than what Chris said, I wouldn't see it as us taking away from APD. The whole reason that they got these 4 officers is because we said, add these officers for trail safety. So now we're saying, actually, we're looking at reprioritizing things, and that's our job.
I had a different understanding, but I'm happy if that is actually how it is, and that it wasn't just part of ABD's request that was just called that, because there's some conflicting information on that.
If I might, what I think APD has been asking for, of course they would be happy with the 500-person police force, but what they've been asking for from us are dispatch, help in getting connection between the public and the police, right? But that's been their consistent ask from us, not for additional police, because, and I'm not anti-police, I want to have a robust police force, but I also want to make sure that our city runs. That's to me, the high value.
John.
Go ahead.
Sorry I was late. I wanted to be here. And just to throw in, I agree with Chris on that. I think the bottleneck with APD has been the support staff at this point. We get more police officers. If that's not caught up, we're in a problem. We have a problem. So, I was surprised at just trail safety officers. I appreciate them listening to us.
And what I have heard, and I don't know that I understand this exactly, but what I think I heard from ONA was that the reason they went from being some kind of a ranger to police is the bargaining agreements established you can't have a sworn officer who is a peace officer doing that work. It has to either be a community service officer or a police officer. A CSO, according to what I heard yesterday, is $20,000 less than a sworn police officer. If that's the case, then it makes sense to have a sworn police officer. But that just brings us back to the first question. Is this the right place to make our extraordinarily limited investment in the infrastructure of our city? That's the question I think we have to wrestle.
Austin and me.
And just to respond to Suzanne, I think maybe the way to frame it is through this budget and working with the administration, we're adding dispatch officers, maybe we peel off 2 and we're adding 2 trail safety officers, and we're strengthening our ability to work and engage with the public and potentially with the health department, a behavioral analyst or something. So I think that's the way I would look at it, is we're all working as a team to do these many things. We're not cutting something that doesn't exist right now. We're all supportive of adding something. It's just how much of what.
And then, sorry, Meg, did you have something?
I was simply going to say that after I heard kind of APD saying we're doing this at the Assembly's request, and I was one of those individuals who said trail safety is a priority, it's a priority for the constituents in my district, but then that they could just otherwise be assigned as well, I kind of want to meter that now a little bit, because I have the feeling that it's not going to necessarily be what I thought the intent was going to be in operation to some extent. So I see some additional, I guess I would rather pilot it a little bit smaller if we're going to add to see if it's actually going to happen or not, so.
Thanks. Pete?
Thank you. Well, you know, when the highest priority for many of the constituents that we hear from is, what the hell are you going to do about all these homeless people? And so, you know, we have to try something a little bit different, because what we've been doing is, it seems to be creating an endless cycle, and we're being roundly criticized for it, and we probably maybe deserve a little criticism once in a while. But, you know, I've been advocating for these police rangers, trail watch people, whatever you want to call them, for several years, because they used to have that. And you know, maybe we have to go to, you know, a team of two, one a CSO and one a fully sworn officer, to reduce the cost. But if we're going to have some trail watchers, one team in 200 parks, or how many other parks we have, is, you know, it's like throwing sand into the ocean. You know, even two teams of two might not. It's probably not enough, but we have to start somewhere. And you know, and when I mentioned this at the last couple community councils, the last couple nights, people, you know, were thinking that was a good idea. I'm glad we finally got there, so to speak. You know, and so what, you know, whether, you know, there'll be a visual difference or you know, a statistical difference at the end of the year after we have two teams of two people, we don't know until we've tried it. But we have to do something a little bit different, or otherwise it's the insanity circle.
Thanks. Forrest?
Yeah, I think I want to echo what Pete just said. I think what the idea he just had, though, I think is a good one. I wonder if we could go back to the chief and ask, you know, two-person teams, does the second person have to be a police officer? Because our police officers right now don't go in their vehicles. They go out solo cars. It is true that usually they'll wait for a backup before they engage with someone, but they go out by themselves. If there's some other employee, whether it's a parks employee or you know, even like a anchored safety patrol person, something like that, maybe that would help us reduce costs. Because I do agree that if we have one team and that's it, the whole municipality. And by the way, they're not going to. So there will be only certain days when they'll be able to go out there. And it'll be a very small team that'll be kind of out on an island. So I think I support cutting from 4 to 2 because of the money, because we need to fund these other priorities. But I think we need to have a conversation with the police chief about finding a way to more effectively deploy them, as opposed to just one team that occasionally goes out on the trails.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris,
could you show me the third instance in here? I see 2 of the mention of the officers.
Oh, there were just 2.
Oh, just 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Neither of them say police. So in our request, none of them said police.
Mm-hmm.
This is just because of the way that the code functions and the bargaining agreement say we can't police. 2 is probably pretty equal to 4 in terms of the big picture, because you're still only going to have some shifts where
I'm
they're
sure mathematically that it's not.
in terms of actual
2 plus 2
coverage,
equals
though.
2.
No.
I understand.
2 is half of 4. Just
We get what you're saying.
In terms of actual coverage, it's going to be very limited, and these 4 are already subject to redeployment to other priorities at the subject of the chief or the chief's designee. And so we're already looking at limited presence. If it were 2 or 4 or 6 full-time park people, their job is to be inhabiting the parks, I thought there would be parks enforcement, like code enforcement, then it would make sense. But otherwise, it's like we're adding a very small element to a 120-person team, or no, 330-person team, no, 420-person team. We've gone from 330 to 420 since I've been here, you know. So that's the argument I think we have to be careful. I totally support the police and their mission, and I want the clerk to be able to do the job we need him to do.
Thanks. Suzanne?
Just going back to the specifics of what wasn't in the budget for the clerk's department. So using public safety money for, I think that's what I heard, to fund possibly these positions. Which one is the highest priority then? I mean, my assumption would be the elections coordinator, though the minutes clerk, I would assume that's driven by code requirements, and that's maybe 50% position, but I'm just wondering in terms of how these stack as far as priorities and what.
So these plus, there are more priorities that we've already
Well, yeah,
identified. So these are plus.
and I've got amendments too for a behavioral health analyst and an urban fellow, you know, piece.
Desiree?
If we had to pick election coordinator.
Okay.
Austin?
Thanks.
I just want to note that we had a 4.0 earthquake 7 miles away. Just recently?
Yep,
Yes.
it just happened when she said.
Earlier,
Was
when
that an earthquake?
Meg and I were over here shaking around.
These things
Yeah.
didn't start swinging.
I know.
It's on quick.
Kind of weird.
Meg?
It's on quite feet, yes.
Thanks. Yeah, and the reason I put in, I had said in my priorities there was the minutes clerk type position was because Felix said he was already doing some budget moving around on the elections one. So I was hearing that he was handling that. So.
All right. Anything else on sort of where we go from here? Obviously, this isn't the end of the discussion. We're going to have next week. We're all going to reveal our amendments and figure out how to hodgepodge all those together. Okay. Then. Let's see. That is it for our agenda, unless we have anything else. Great. So let's go ahead and go to audience participation.
Wow. Are we supposed to go to one? We're going to have a break?
I know, it's great.
Wait, is there news?
No.
No.
This is magical, folks.
Actually, Eugene, hold on. Suzanne?
So just two things, because the whole issue came up again about waiving reading in the meeting. When we go through the agenda.
Waive reading.
Oh,
Waive
okay.
reading.
Okay, yeah.
And I know we've been, or Mr. Chair or Felix has been functioning with, you know, you read the bold part, which apparently is in the code somewhere, I heard.
Yep. I asked Bill to look it up.
Yeah.
Because they were giving
Yeah,
a
I
hard
had that
time, and I was like, what's going on over there? And so he looked it up, as Bill always does.
Wait, who's giving you, we've been doing that for
Who decides
years.
what's gold?
Ethan was kind of snickering at
Yes. Yes.
Felix during the meetings.
I could hear it. I usually just ignore it.
So
but I
Bill
could hear
looked it up, and he
Okay.
said there's a
Yeah.
provision of code that says the title or condensed title of an ordinance has to be read. And he added, we should change that.
Yeah, okay.
And the condensed
Okay, sorry,
title
Suzanne,
is-
I'm
That's
still in
okay.
your thunder.
No, that's fine.
Sorry about that.
And then the second thing was, we've been talking about e-cigarettes, and are we going to, when the tax AO comes forward, we're gonna have a larger discussion about it. I know, Pete, you were talking about that last time. And I wanted to ask everybody if there's interest in considering Lisa Murkowski's Safe Kids Act, Safe Children's, or actually it's called Stopping Appealing Flavors in E-Cigarettes for Kids.
They always do that in
Last year.
Congress. It's like a funny act.
It'd be fine to add that to the tax, I think.
Yeah.
Can you say what it is? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it banning flavors?
Well, actually, it specifies a tobacco product that is not cigarette or any component parts, can't contain artificial and natural flavor other than tobacco or herb or spice, including menthol, strawberry, grape, orange, clove, cinnamon, and so on. It spells out which flavor.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I would want to know data on that. Like, are kids using those flavors? Like, why are we picking
Yes.
those? But assuming there's a bunch of information that backs up the
There is.
idea, then
Yeah.
I'm down.
Okay.
I don't know why we wouldn't keep them together. We can do it separate or together, it doesn't matter.
So in the interest of being efficient with legal and staff time, would the next step be to go ahead and draft a potential AO or come back to the Rules Committee with some more information and then go from there? Does anyone have a preference?
Well,
Yeah, Pete.
are we planning to tax the vaping
Yes.
the same as cigarettes in percentage, or how's that supposed to work?
Yes, we have an ordinance that I've drafted, and we have been working with the administration. There was that correspondence as well, and I've modeled it after similar language with Nazi Rome, and I think that we'll get that for the end of the year. for the body to tax electronic cigarettes and vaping products at the same rate as other tobacco products, which are currently taxed, and that's 55% of the wholesale price. So it's intended to be excise tax, prohibitive, and discourage its importation into our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
John?
I was gonna go on another topic.
Comment on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Austin?
If that's okay. And then, so a few things. I don't think you need to wait for the rules committee. I think you and whoever's working on the ban could work on that. It seems like they should be separate to me. Like one is about tax and one is about what we allow to be sold.
Nothing's measured.
I understand, but I think it makes more sense to have two different I mean, just personally, unless you think there's some strategic reason to combine them. And then I think that we should all get some sort of presentation or information about flavors and what's going on nationally, and which I'm sure would happen in a work
We
session.
invite Senator Murkowski's staff to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, and my concern would be, I wouldn't want to, I know this is a potentially contentious topic, and I wouldn't want to spin things up. We have a lot going on, too, unless the body felt like it was, worth the investment of time to kick it off.
Well, we could always do the jacks now and then come back in a few months.
Okay, thanks, Austin.
Forrest on this?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Austin just said. I would recommend go forward with the tax, which makes sense because it also will impact the budget, so we kind of want it rolling sooner. The ban, I have some substantive questions about it, like are we banning menthol cigarettes at the same time? Are we banning menthol in chew?
But maybe those aren't kids.
Yeah, the kids are bringing the jewels that are
Oh,
flavored.
you didn't go to my high school.
I know, it's different now. It's different now. Kids right
You're
now
old.
have easy
You're old
access.
enough to do that. That's why we need some data.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so I
Yeah,
actually think
I'd
that
be
that
happy
actually
to
is more
share that.
contentious than the tax. We'll see.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, thanks.
Dean?
From a legal perspective, I would definitely keep the taxation and the banning certain flavors separate.
Dean wants more work.
Thanks. So before I go on to you, John, so we are going to have our regular rules committee at the end of the month. So if there's things that you feel are very urgent, then we can talk about it now. But it's not on our agenda to talk about other things. But you're good? Okay, cool.
Wait, no, I thought the rules committee,
during a regular rules committee, we'll
Okay,
talk
this
about
is
all
a
the
special
other
thing.
things.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a special rules committee.
Gotcha.
Special.
No, special.
It feels special.
Yeah.
The earthquakes.
Anytime it's not the regular meeting, it's a special.
Didn't realize, sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Did Weddleton get a chance to go?
He's going to open the
Defer.
first.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
My name is Eugene Carl Heyman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is not appropriate, decision made by the governing body is more likely. I think it's voted and that's it. I'll take this document that was passed out to you all, covering sheet says Assembly Department budget, and then it says Municipal Clerk's office. It does, I asked that they click over here. Is this dated? When was this written? This is the date from who? But the top sheet, they don't know. It's coming from the clerk's office, but when is it? Who wrote it? If it's coming from the clerk's office, it should be a signature, a name identified within a date. So with this type of information, was it written yesterday, or whenever? So we talked extensively on the clerk's budget proposals and whatever. The fact is, you and I are both blind to this document and identity as far as the first page here. Number 2, minutes. It was yesterday, I was at the meeting here, this room with about approximately 4 members of the assembly and I was astonished when Barbara Jones said the words. I wasn't too surprised because I knew when I saw on the agendas of your meetings in USAC, it was showing dates of 2018, and we're in 2019, and we're getting close to 2020, okay? So that was, I already knew something was going wrong there. And then it was said, Barbara Jones said here, she came later in the meeting, but in this room, said, we're a year behind. Now, as with all due respect, record keeping, when you have a meeting in LUSAC, on the assembly, the very next meeting of your regular meeting should have the minutes. Not 1 year later, not 10 months later, and not all these excuses that have happened. It's one thing to be a little bit behind, but 10 months, a year behind, something's really broken. And I was really concerned with the words earlier by Assemblymember Peterson with the idea of conspiracy and yeah, and then the followed with laughter. This is nothing to laugh about. One, the principal roles of the clerk, whether it's in Palmer, Wasilla, Matsu-Borough, or in Anchorage, is the deal outside the election, is when you have your meetings in LUSAC, those minutes are approved the following meeting and are available to the public to look at. And I'll remind you, when you have such a late time of looking at something, it gets more and more fuzzy of what really happened. And we're talking about votes and stuff like that. And what's happened is a situation where these minutes are creating a situation where other assembly members on the assembly, and those have not been approved yet, and they were there, and now new members of the assembly are here, and they were not part of the minutes that yet to be approved. That's the chaos that's going up. And I'll leave you with that because my time's up, and I'll say more later.
John?
It's a question for Dean. Do we even need to do hard copy minutes? We have an agenda, and you can click to parts of the video, so that it seems like minutes are kind of an outmoded way of doing things. You can actually watch the video.
Barbara might be better source to answer that question. I think it is definitely recommended. Do you mean the hard copy for review before you approve them at your assembly meetings? Or do you just need a hard copy generally?
I think it's worth thinking about. I mean, do we really need them, or maybe all you need is to issue the vote, move on? You don't need
Copy of the charter.
something.
So one thing that is done directly after the meeting is an action minute. So we do record the vote directly after the meeting. So although the clerk's office is behind on the, several page minutes that you all receive, the action agendas are recorded and you have those up to date.
Chris?
And, my experience with records is that even in the last, since 2004, when electronic records have been very common everywhere, that it's still the paper ones in the end you have to run back to when you can't quite find what you need. It's just like Bill going and listening to the tapes from 1970 something. The better records we keep, the better we are in case something happens to this piece or that piece or that piece of the record wherever it's kept. So I think it is, like Dean said, best practice to keep those records.
Crystal?
Thank you. I guess my question would be, Jennifer, for you is, so in the minutes, like I haven't been approving any of the minutes because I wasn't a part of the assembly during any of that time, but once, after April, by the time we start getting the April minutes, I'll be reading them pretty much all the way through, especially in terms of comments, because what I discovered on the Anchorage School Board is things were not verbatim, they were summarized in the minutes. So a lot of times conversations were tried to capture them in a small couple of sentences, and it was often I had to go back and say, no, that's not what I said, and I would have to have them actually clarify their summary of what they thought I said. So how typically is that done with the assembly minutes?
And that's one of the reasons that we don't do verbatim comments. We do action minutes. So the comments of people and members are not included in our minutes. And that's, to your point, those are often open for interpretation and they get mistranscribed. That's why we make audio available, video available, and then the minutes are a third way that we record just the action. And so it'll say, so-and-so gave public comment, or so-and-so testified. But we don't get the meat of what they said. That's where the audio and video become the record.
Okay. Well, then that kind of goes to John's point then about really how much of a minute do we really need?
Yeah, this is a good question for Barbara. Meg?
Thanks. I just sent to Jennifer, Barbara, and Felix. I have a friend whose hobby it was to create transcripts of the assembly meetings for a while. He's since moved out of state, but I asked him what he used. So I've sent that information out. It's like $10 a month, and it's a drag and drop thing, and he said it's fairly accurate. He was all about, it's kind of the younger counterpart to what Eugene does, sorry, but with technology, like public process, making sure it's transparent. I just said it however it is, but so I've sent that information on for whatever it's worth. So
Eugene's
So
almost
it's a
even
millennial Eugene?
it's a millennial, yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So anyway, so there are things out there that could potentially produce something verbatim. So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
So-
All right. Go ahead, John, and then we'll close it up.
Or you could gavel.
All right, I'm going to go.